Is it possible for an NBA team to trade for a player who has perceived diminished value across the entire league, trade for that player, rehabilitate his value, and then trade him for draft assets? Let's talk about what the Utah Jazz attempted to do.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So the Jazz, there's a couple of scenarios here. There are a couple players involved, what the Jazz attempted to do. Let's talk about the first one and then talk about the second one. The first one is Colin Sexton. Now, Colin Sexton was included in the Donovan Mitchell trade to the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, and then a bunch of draft picks. So Colin was not the only player included in that trade. He was not the main player included in that. Lauri was obviously the most prominent player included in that trade. Now, Colin was coming off of a year with the Cleveland Cavaliers where he had suffered a significant knee injury early in the year. He only played 11 games with the Cleveland Cavaliers the previous year. However, the year previous to that was Colin's best year as an NBA player, where he averaged 24.3 points per game with the Cavs, and his shooting numbers were really good. I mean, he had a terrific year. So I believe that Danny Ainge, when he made this trade, he thought that Colin Sexton was going to be a player that he could rehabilitate his value in the eyes of other NBA executives and turn him into a trade asset. His numbers, Colin Sexton's numbers, certainly were good with the Utah Jazz. I mean, they started out slow. We will look at those numbers in a second, but it never materialized where the Jazz were able to turn him into a tradable asset in terms of bringing back draft capital, which I think was the intent the entire time. So the Jazz, I fully believe that Colin Sexton has been available for trade over the past 2 seasons, certainly. And there was no interest. There was no market interest, no interest from other NBA teams. And so once Austin Ainge came in this offseason as president of basketball operations, president of the Jazz, he made a decision and said that we need to clear out all these veterans, and he made a trade, and he instituted a trade, and the Jazz moved Colin Sexton along and got absolutely nothing in return for him, nothing of value. So that was the end of Colin Sexton. Now let's look at Colin Sexton's numbers, and his numbers were actually really good. That first year with the Jazz, as you can see here, he played 24 minutes a game in that first year coming back from injury, scored 14.3 points per game, 51% from the field, 39% from three, 82% from the line, and 2.9 assists per game. So decent numbers for his first year back from a significant injury. And then that second year with the Jazz, his minutes went up again to 26.6. His points went up to 18.7. His field goal percentage was 49. Three-point percentage 39, free throw percentage 86, and then he had a career high in assists per game at 4.9, which is an absolutely great number for Colin Sexton. In last year with the Jazz, the final year with the Jazz, he played 28 minutes a game, 18.4 points, 48% from the field, 41% from three, 87% from the line, 4.2 assists per game. Again, all these numbers are really good. The only negative in any of these numbers is really the plus minus, where he has a negative plus minus. But the thing is, the Jazz were not trying to win games. The Jazz were positioning themselves in the lottery and positioning themselves for ping pong balls. They weren't trying to win. So as a result, Colin's plus minus numbers are, of course, going to be not great. And they weren't great. However, another problem with the Colin Sexton value is that there's a negative perception around small guards right now in the NBA because nobody believes that the small guards can guard anybody. And especially these small guards who are more two guards than they are point guards, which Collin certainly is. Collin is not a point guard. You could say he's maybe a combo guard, but he's a scorer. I mean, that's Collin's forte. He's a scorer, and he's barely over 6 feet tall, and he's a scorer. So in this era of constantly switching on defense, there's this perception that you're going to get matched up with a larger player, and you're always going to be in a disadvantage on defense because you're playing these guys who are 6 feet tall. I mean, there is some truth to that. I don't fully buy into that. There are obviously smaller players who are very good and who would, like the instance of Jalen Brunson. If Jalen Brunson came on the market, there'd be all sorts of interest in him. Jalen Brunson is obviously the Knicks' best player. There would be teams offering all sorts of draft capital to acquire Jalen Brunson if the Knicks made him available in a trade. So it's not all smaller players, but certainly there's this perceived negative value of these 6 foot tall players anymore, and Collin is barely over 6 feet tall. So they're dealing with that. But the thing is, he put up good numbers, efficient numbers, yet there was no trade value in terms of bringing back draft capital. And I think that was the intent of Danny Ainge all along. It just didn't work out. So let's look at the next situation, and that is the one of John Collins. Now, John Collins was playing for the Atlanta Hawks. He had signed a 5-year contract with the Atlanta Hawks. The 5th year was a player option, and that final year, the player option year, is this coming year, and he'll be paid $27 million. So John Collins picked up his player option. He's going to be paid $27 million this coming season. The Jazz traded him in the offseason. This coming season, he'll be playing with the Los Angeles Clippers. But again, I think the whole idea of trading for John Collins was the Jazz, John Collins had perceived diminished value around the entire NBA. Atlanta had been trying to shop that contract to try and get him off the books. They just couldn't even find any takers. So the Jazz ended up trading Rudy Gay and a conditional second round pick for John Collins. They basically gave up nothing because Rudy Gay was a negative contract. He was negative on the court, and he's no longer in the league. Obviously, he just didn't have any value as a basketball player, an NBA player, any longer. And so they traded nothing to acquire John Collins. And John Collins, again, in earlier years with the Atlanta Hawks, he put up some really good numbers. When the Jazz traded for him, he was going through a problem with his hand. He was having a significant issue with his finger on his shooting hand. His shooting numbers, his efficiency had declined. He was having a really difficult year from 3 that previous year. So the acquisition of John Collins, Atlanta just couldn't find a suitor in a trade. And so the Jazz just essentially absorbed the contract. That's what they did in the trade. They absorbed the contract and gave up nothing. And I fully believe the intent by Danny Ainge, again, was to rehabilitate the value of John Collins and then trade that for draft capital. I think that was the intent all along. And certainly, if we look at these numbers of John Collins, last year, he played 30.5 minutes a game for the Jazz, 19 points a game, 53% from the field, 40% from 3, 85% from the line, 8.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. I mean, those are fantastic numbers. A highly efficient number. For somebody of John Collins' size, those are fabulous NBA numbers. John Collins isn't a terrific defender. He's a mediocre defender, but the offense is certainly there, and he can certainly contribute to a good team in a significant way, playing meaningful minutes. That he can do. So I fully anticipate next year with the Clippers, he's going to have a good year. But unfortunately, the Jazz just weren't able to turn him into draft capital. And so I think the moral of this whole story is that trying to acquire these type of players who have a perceived diminished value around the league among all the other NBA teams, I think trying to repair that value and then turn that value into, and to then turn that player into a tradable asset, meaning, and in the Jazz case, obviously they want to draft capital. It just, I mean, I don't think that's a viable strategy moving forward, not only for the Jazz, for any NBA team. Once a player has the perceived negative value, like they're overpaid, they just aren't that good, I think trying to repair that and then turn it into a draft asset, I don't think that's viable. On the other hand, and I don't even blame the Jazz for trying that. I mean, I would have done the same thing. It's like evaluating any asset: buy low, sell high. And whether you're evaluating a stock, a company, and you're looking to buy the stock of that company, I mean, you look at the PE ratio, the debt ratio, you look at the income statement, you look at the balance sheet, you look at the revenue growth over time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You look at all those parameters, and then you say, okay, is this an undervalued stock? Is it a fairly valued stock? There's overvalued stock. And if it's an undervalued stock, say, okay, I'm going to purchase a bunch of shares. I'm going to hold those shares for 6 months, a year, 2 years, or maybe it's a very long-term outlook on the, and then you're going to sell it. Meaning you're buying low, selling high. And this is done multiple times every day by many people, by many companies. You're evaluating assets and you're trying to buy low and sell high. And that's what the Jazz tried to do. I don't blame the Jazz for doing that because, quite frankly, if I were in the Jazz position, I would have tried to do the same thing. But as it turns out, it just didn't work out. And I think that once there's a negative perception among NBA executives, it's just really hard to repair that value and turn into a tradable asset in terms of bringing back draft capital, which is what the Jazz really want to do. So we look at this from the Clippers standpoint now, though, in the John Collins situation, and possibly even the Colin Sexton situation with the Hornets, but let's just leave it at John Collins. So the Clippers are paying him $27 million this year. And I think that John Collins is going to have a terrific year with the Los Angeles Clippers. I think he's going to put up really good numbers. But next offseason, when John Collins is no longer under contract, I think that his next contract is going to be significantly less than $27 million a year. His next contract more than likely becomes a value play. And I think the Clippers have an inside track, since I think he is going to have a good year at the Clippers. Assuming the Clippers are still trying to win games the year after this year, I mean, it's always possible the Clippers blow it up and try and rebuild. That's a possibility. They have a bunch of aging players. But assuming they're still trying to win games, still trying to be competitive, I believe that John Collins, that next John Collins contract is actually going to be a value contract, meaning his productivity on the court exceeds what he's being paid. And if you're looking to be competitive long-term in the NBA with all these second apron issues, with what is essentially turned into a hard cap, you need those value contracts. They are imperative. That's how you have sustainably high level of play. You get these guys in that are being paid less than what they produce on the court, and you have to have those guys. You have to have those contracts. That's the only way forward. You just can't pay and pay and pay players anymore because the consequences are way too great. So you have to have those guys that are producing more, these veteran guys. In some cases, they're veteran guys who are producing more than what they're being paid. In other situations, this is another reason why getting excess draft capital is so important, because you have more opportunities to bring in rookies who can be productive on those rookie scale contracts, and that's also important in this era of the second apron problems. And that, again, that's another avenue where you can get guys, players who are producing more on the court than what they are actually being paid. And again, this is how you sustain high level of play. You have to have these value contracts. Now, it didn't work out for the Jazz flipping these into tradable assets, but I think that it's still a viable strategy from trying to bring in players who have a perceived diminished value and then rehabilitating that value to be a productive player for your own franchise. Yes, it didn't work for the Jazz, but I believe it's actually going to work out for the Clippers. And I hope it does, because John Collins is a really good dude. I mean, really good, solid guy. Totally positive, never any negatives with him, on or off the court, just seems like a really good guy. So I hope it works out for him. And even if he's signing, a contract that's somewhere in the teens, which I think is highly likely that that'll be his next contract, he'll still be highly paid, not nearly what he was paid, but still highly paid and be a productive player for the Clippers. So I think this can certainly be a good situation for John Collins and the Clippers both. And I wish him the best of luck. I hope it works out for him. And I hope it works out for Colin too. I think Colin was in a really difficult situation with the Jazz. He didn't play as much as I'm sure that he wanted to play, and he sat out a whole bunch of games, just like John Collins did, just like Lowry did when the Jazz are trying to lose games. So I wish the best for Colin Sexton moving forward. But those are my thoughts on this particular topic. I think that getting these players with perceived diminished value can be a viable strategy for bringing guys in and then retaining guys on value contracts, but in terms of turning them into trade assets to move along to other teams for draft capital like the Jazz seemingly tried to do, I don't think that's a winning strategy moving forward as we've seen play out. I don't think it's a winning strategy for the Jazz. I don't think it's a winning strategy for any other franchise. Fortunately for the Jazz, they've cleared the books, and all the veterans, John Collins is gone, Colin Sexton is gone, Jordan Clarkson was bought out, and they're strictly in the development mode of the young players, and also, the evaluation mode of the young players, because some of those guys are coming up on contract extension, and the Jazz need to evaluate and see if they want to extend these guys with contract extensions. So we'll see what happens. It's certainly going to be an interesting year this coming year, watching all the young guys play. But anyway, those are my thoughts on this particular subject. And for those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And you can also follow us at X at Jazz Smack. And we will talk to everybody later.